Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. My name's Robert Draper. I write for the New York Times Magazine. I used to be a staff writer at Texas Monthly, so it's great to be back home. Welcome, everyone, to what I believe is the 6th iteration of the Texas Tribune Festival. And our panel today is The View from Elsewhere. Before I introduce our distinguished guests, a couple of housekeeping details. First of all, this is going to be 60 minutes. We'll probably talk up here, maybe 45 minutes, something like that, and then we'll take questions. There'll be microphones in at the audience. Immediately following this, the gentleman to my right, Governor Hickenlooper, will be signing copies of his book out in the courtyard. The book is The Opposite of Woe, and it is the opposite of a conventional political memoir, which I really enjoyed reading and think you will too. There will also be a reception, a cocktail reception in the self-same courtyard, so that's available too. Do extinguish your cell phones, however, feel free to live tweet the event. I think the hashtag is hashtag TTF. As I said, this is The View from Elsewhere, and the gentleman to my right is Governor John Hickenlooper from Colorado, who began his career as a geologist in Denver. Upon being laid off, then found his next calling in beer and started up the Wynkoop microbrewery in downtown Denver. In 2003, he ran for the mayor of that city. He won with 65% of the vote. I think served 2 terms, right? And then after that ran for governor of the state of Colorado in 2010. He is into his 2nd term now. To his right, Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, a native of Bentonville, correct? Under the Reagan administration, Mr. Hutchinson was appointed the U.S. Attorney in 1982 at the age of 31, the tender age of 31, making him, I believe, the youngest U.S. Attorney serving in the nation at that time. In 1996, he succeeded his brother Tim Hutchinson in the 3rd Congressional District of Arkansas. In 2001, President George W. Bush appointed him the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and later as the head of the largest division, as undersecretary to the largest division under the nascent Department of Homeland Security. So, in talking about The View from Elsewhere, we'll talk about issues that are pertinent to those states that may be somewhat applicable to the state of Texas, but I'd be remiss not to start with a couple of things that are in the headlines. Inevitably, Donald Trump. Governor Hutchinson, not really much in the way of a surprise of what's probably going to happen in your state on November the 8th, but Governor Hickenlooper, your state, I think, ranks 25 out of 50 in blueness. It is a true swing state. Can Trump carry Colorado?
Well, he certainly could. I don't think he's going to. Well, certainly I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he doesn't.
You're with her.
But Colorado is an independent thinking state, and there are some things that Donald Trump says that people feel that they want to hear, and some Republicans, some Democrats. He still, depends on which poll you look at, he's still got a ways to go. I don't think he'll be able to get to, I don't think he's going to catch her. But he's definitely got more strength there. It's interesting, his greatest liability there is probably his draw with the Republicans. Colorado was very strong supporters for Ted Cruz, the person who was previously out here. And there's a lot of family values in Colorado, and Donald Trump doesn't appeal to them as strongly as someone like John Kasich or Ted Cruz.
Sure. Now, the conventional wisdom had been that the Latino population would come out strong against Trump. On the other hand, I wonder if you're concerned that the polls are not altogether capturing the breadth of his support, that there are some people who perhaps won't admit to being Trump voters. I mean, do you worry that the numbers can be deceiving?
Sure. I mean, and given the significance of this election and how polarized the country is, anybody should be worrying about this. And not all the polls, but so many polls were wrong about Brexit, and so many people were surprised. Certainly, 9 months and a year out, completely misleading. And I think that makes anyone think. People may say to a pollster one thing and then vote a different way, and that's gonna, that's a cause for anxiety. Hopefully, it'll make everybody work harder.
All right. Now, Governor Hutchinson, you were against him before you were for him. In February, I believe, you had said that his words are frightening. You were concerned about his talk about the wall. How is he going to pay for this wall, among other things? I think that your support for him now is less an affirmative action than more a signal of your concern for a Hillary Clinton presidency. Nonetheless, under a Trump presidency, would you be concerned that his rather protectionist posture on trade agreements would undo some of the gains that have taken place vis-a-vis economic development and job creation in the state of Arkansas?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be with my friend Governor Hickenlooper. And in terms of my progression, I'm always looking at who is my style, who would lead our party well, and I did support Marco Rubio, but whenever it came down to Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, there wasn't any choice there. And in terms of style, it might be different with Donald Trump. So I don't shy away from that, but I am fully convinced that there's so much at stake in our country that when you look at this choice before us, that it's very important that Donald Trump win. And that is because of our court. That's because who's going to give the states the most flexibility in terms of health care policy. I think that'll be a Trump presidency. And in terms of trade policy, I do want to address that. You're absolutely right. Arkansas, with our exports of rice, our exports of poultry. I'm going to China for my second trip as governor this year, trying to bring more industry from China and investment into our state, which is working. We just succeeded in a $1 billion investment from China in South Arkansas for a bioproducts mill. And so we like that exchange. We like the global marketplace. And so we don't want to put up trade barriers that interfere with that global marketplace that benefits Arkansas. Sure, there's constraints, there's problems within the manufacturing sector that we do lose jobs. We're also recognizing that we're bringing in manufacturing jobs over the global marketplace because logistics favor us in the United States, cost of production in other states, and so it's starting to return. So what's my view of Donald Trump and his trade policy? I hope that the pro-trade philosophy of the Republican Party will help shape a Trump presidency.
Well, because Governor, that there are a lot of people, a lot of Republicans who decided to support Trump, and in fact, Senator Cruz was here a few minutes ago citing this as his major reason for doing so. His list that has now been expanded to 21 potential Supreme Court nominees. This has not been a big thing for Trump. We have not been hearing him talk about the Supreme Court for years and years and years. We have been hearing him talk about one thing for 30 years, and that's trade agreements. He has consistently said these are rotten trade deals. So whether or not Republicans can trust him to nominate in their view, like-minded successor to Scalia could be argued as questionable. What's probably less questionable is that he's going to be protectionist. I mean, this is where he's been.
Well, what he's been for is we have not negotiated from a position of strength in our trade agreements. Right. We need to be tougher in negotiation. I agree with that point. We need to be tougher in terms of our enforcement of the existing trade agreements. We've been soft. We need to be more aggressive. I agree with that point. The only area that we disagree is simply in whether we need to be raising trade barriers and tariffs to protect the United States industry. That's never proven successful for us. So I'm confident that hopefully a Republican-led Congress will will let him be the tough negotiator that he is, but also be constrained in putting up artificial trade barriers for the United States that only protects industry that really needs to be more noble, needs to be more fluid and progressive in terms of being efficient and competing globally.
Are you concerned at all? Governor Hickenlooper was saying a couple of minutes ago that there are a lot of Republicans who kind of have traditional values in the state of Colorado, and that they're going to look askance at Trump because of that. Are you concerned that there are a lot of Republicans in your state who are just going to be turned off by this man's character and temperament, his own misadventures, and stay away from the polls as a result?
My sense is that in Arkansas, and Arkansas probably typifies a southern state with conservative values, they're energized. And so I think there will be a good turnout. I think the debate next Tuesday is probably emblematic of it, that you're going to have probably one of the largest viewing audiences of any debate in recent history. And so there is a high level of excitement and intensity. In terms of the evangelical base, has been nervousness about Donald Trump, but there's some major evangelical leaders that are very supportive and outspoken. And I think it's recognizing, one, that Donald Trump is willing to listen and learn. Secondly, the alternative is not good. And thirdly, so much is at stake that, again, the evangelical base believes that the importance of the court and who's going to be leading the Justice Department, who's going to be leading the Department of Education. They're much more comfortable with a Trump-Pence. And let me tell you, Mike Pence in that equation makes a big difference to the comfort level of evangelicals and conservatives across the country. So I think there's really a growing sense of comfort and enthusiasm about the Trump candidacy and presidency than there has been even in the last 3 or 4 months.
So, Governor Hickenlooper, the operative word there was enthusiasm. We've been hearing about this enthusiasm gap between the two, and I wonder, and I'm with her as a Hillary supporter, you're concerned about that, and concerned additionally that Secretary Clinton has not, at least in recent weeks, made much of an affirmative case for voting for her and is concentrated for her, and instead concentrated on attacking her opponent.
Well, he provides a pretty big target, so I can understand that being almost irresistible.
But that can be a trap, right?
It could be a trap, and I think in the debate you'll see a better representation of her policy thoughts. Unlike Mr. Trump, she has in great detail laid out what she wants to do. I ended up getting vetted. I'm very proud.
Yes.
Very relieved and grateful that I didn't get chosen, but got vetted for VP. So I spent several hours with Secretary Clinton, and she answered every question. The two things I came away from: I've never met an elected official who understands policy at a deeper level, and going back 30 years in history, why things didn't work or why other things worked. This notion that she's on some sort of power, you can't learn that much policy without being deeply empathetic and without immersing yourself over decades in trying to solve problems. She's a problem solver. She's got that genetic inclination to try and make the world better. So that was very powerful for me. And then once you look at it and you step back, and she obviously does have a paranoia about the media. Mm-hmm. She feels the media's been unfair to her especially.
You're saying that as an observer, or you're saying that as a result of the conversations you had?
No, I'm saying that as an observer. Yeah. But certainly she does not embrace the media. She's not as open as say, Donald Trump.
You don't say.
Yeah, it does. But I think when you go back and look at some of the cases that I hope she'll make, I mean, the President of the United States is one of the most emulated people on earth. And someone who really has a cavalier, at best, a cavalier respect for the truth is Donald Trump. He'll twist he doesn't even use facts, right? And he'll say one thing one day, and the next day he'll say something completely different. 1 minute just go on and on. Is that who we want our kids to grow up? He's been in 3,500 lawsuits. He'll pretty much do anything to get what he wants or what's good for him. That level of kind of focused selfishness and kind of egocentric behavior. So that's one thing that she offers now she may be, not trusting of the media, but she is certainly somebody who has spent her life as trying to help other people and can demonstrate it. Even his foundation, right? He doesn't put any of his own money into it. It's not his generosity. It's a way of promoting his brand and somehow lifting himself up.
And we heard a lot of that at the convention. We haven't heard much of it since. Again, that was the affirmative case for her. Although, how do you square the belief that Mr. Trump engages in serial prevarication with Hillary Clinton's even higher untrustworthy numbers?
Well, unlike him, she's had $1 billion, multi-billion dollars over the last couple of years spent tearing her down. People say she can't do economic development. She created a cottage industry of people attacking her, funded by, not just by the Koch brothers, but by all sorts of people that have a self-interest, right? And I think the server's a classic example. She was trying to keep the media at bay. From her personal stuff, she didn't want her friends or her family to get ripped through, dragged out into the public domain. And she had been led to believe that, and she says it was a mistake. I'm not saying it wasn't a mistake.
Do you think it was a mistake?
Yeah, of course. It was obviously, but back then she just thought it was a simple, legal, straightforward way. As long as you don't send anything that's highly confidential, that's marked top secret, make sure you don't send any email like that. She thought it was a way to protect herself or protect her friends and family, I think, more than anything else. That becomes the single reason that no one trusts her. It just doesn't, it's a single reason because certain media, and Fox is at the top of that list, but they're not the only one, have gone out there, bloggers, there is a whole industry trying to rip her down.
Well, we'll move on in a minute, but Governor Hutchinson, I have to ask you that do you, since your announcement of support for Trump is as much as anything else, or perhaps more so, a determination not to see a Hillary Clinton presidency, is it that you view her as essentially a third term of the Obama presidency, or do you view her as actually someone who would be a worse president than Obama? Or do you see her uniquely as a president that we should be concerned about?
Well, she would certainly, in my view, carry on a third term of the Trump presidency. If you're looking at the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, who's going to continue that? It's certainly going to be a Hillary Clinton presidency. She might make some tweaks to it, but it's going to march on with a centralized approach to it. And that's consistent with her history. Whenever she was the First Lady under a Bill Clinton presidency, she's the one that pushed forward the Hillary Care during that time, government central health care delivery system. And so she would, when it comes to the court nominees, I actually think she's a very pure liberal. I think she's much more philosophical than her husband, Bill. He was pragmatic. I think she is philosophically a liberal, and I think she will appoint members of the court in that fashion. I think you're going to continue to see the paranoia that Governor Hickenlooper described. That will continue during her presidency.
I think he referred to it as aversion to the press, not paranoia.
Well, that's true, but I question whether there would be the confidence level in her presidency. She's going to start out with a deficit in terms of trust, in terms of confidence in how she handles things. And so it's a contrast, but I look at, my choice is that there's a growing momentum for a Trump-Pence presidency. I support that. And it's not just simply the defects that we see in a Hillary Clinton presidency.
They're of course, from your home state. I mean, did you, in real time, did you view Bill Clinton back then, back in the 90s, and for that matter before him, as someone more pragmatic than Hillary Clinton? Did you identify her from way back as someone more liberal, or is this a conclusion you've reached recently?
Well, I observed it most while he was president. I was in Congress when Bill Clinton was president. We actually had the last balanced budget compromise with Congress trying to control spending, and so I saw his pragmatism while he was president. While he was governor, and you're right, we dealt with Hillary as First Lady of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Some people forget that, and Bill Clinton as 10 years or 9 years as governor, and so we saw him first up close. He had liberal tendencies, but he was, somewhat pragmatic. But they pushed forward, both of them, a more high tax, high regulatory environment, and that I think would be typical of what she would do as president.
The second matter I wanted to touch on that's been in the news.
Before we let that go, we should point out that she Obama did pick up that nasty habit that Bill Clinton had of having 8 consecutive years of job growth and expanding economy. Between the two of them, it's the only time it's happened in 40 years.
Well, there's not many that would, there's a little bit of nervousness still, despite the success in Colorado and the success in Arkansas economically, that there's still a great deal of nervousness. Someone made the comment that it's really the Federal Reserve with such low interest rates that any economy is going to move forward somewhat during this time. The question is, who's going to be the best to produce the economy whenever we have this election over with? And I don't think it's a centralized government. It is high taxes. What's our tax plan? Is to 65% for the farmers that want to pass their farm down to the next generation.
Well,
Take
they've got
65%
a
of
farm
it.
worth $200 million or something. You got to get pretty high up for that.
Yeah. These are not small farms, yeah.
Yeah, this is not a family, small neighborhood farm. It might be.
Well, no, that's where, it's totally mistaken. Farms in Arkansas, you have some small family farms, you've got large farms, you've got people who have built their businesses for their lifetime, and to have the government take and confiscate 65% of the wealth that's been built
Well, what Governor
up,
Hickenlooper is referring to is that particular tax threshold applies to farms or any property that's in excess of, I think, $200 million or something like that. We're not
very high threshold.
The 65% does not apply to, a very small family farm.
It's not $10 million or $20 million.
I understand, but you have people who have built businesses and they want to continue to grow those businesses. Do we want to say there's a cap on how much we grow in this economy? And I think that's a wrong-headed policy.
The other matter that's been in the news, a tragic one, of course, has been relating to the police shootings in African-American communities. Both of you gentlemen have seen peaceful protests. Knock on wood, they have been peaceful in your states over the last year. Governor Hutchinson, I know that you attended, I think, a month ago, a forum on race relations with the police community. Are these talks fruitful? Is it just the very fact of them that's important, or is there anything actually that comes out of such discussions that can help prevent the tragedies that we've been seeing most recently in Tulsa and Charlotte?
If you're not talking in advance, then you never have a chance to bring a community together after the incident. Right. And that's, to me, an important lesson learned. You've got to look at it from, why does this happen? We don't know all the facts, but whenever you have an officer that makes a negligent mistake in terms of a response, is that training? Is it a lack of trust? Is it judging what the facts are before you see them? This is preventable, it's trainable. We've got to do a better job on the front end. And we also, in communication, build that trust within the community. Then the second part of it is the response. And we've got to recognize that human beings make mistakes, and it doesn't always represent intentional conduct. And we've got to do a better job of preventing those. But we can't turn our cities into riots. We can't have this level of a lack of support for our law enforcement. And so let's do what we can on the front end to train, to prevent, to communicate, and we'll have a better chance of success in the end whenever a mistake does happen.
Governor Hickenlooper, you saw the unrest that became tumultuous in the streets of Charlotte. It's again, thank God, nothing of that order has yet taken place in Denver or anywhere else in Colorado. But how did you view the management of that situation? I know you don't want to second guess anyone else, but insofar as you're able to deduce how that was handled, what do you think?
I don't want to second guess. When you're in those situations, it's tough, having been a mayor. And we were talking before about between when I got elected in 2003 of mayor of Denver and then I took office six weeks later, we had a young 15-year-old African-American kid who had some developmental challenges named Paul Childs. And his mother or sister had actually called the police and 911. He was walking around the kitchen with a knife with the point sticking up. He was clearly not quite all there. And anyway, the police came. The house was empty. He was of no danger to anyone else. And he was still 12, 14 feet away. And the police officer told him, stop. stop, stop, and then he shot him 6 times in his own living room. And I think, the wheels just about came off of the whole city in that period of time. And I was lucky that my predecessor was an African-American mayor, Mayor Wellington Webb, who had done a great deal, just exactly what Governor Hutchinson is talking about. A lot of relationships and trying to build relationships between public safety and the community. It didn't mean it wasn't still very tense, and we created civilian oversight. We got non-lethal, beanbag shotguns and tasers. We made sure every police officer got what they call CIT, crisis intervention training, so you can recognize when a kid does have developmental disabilities or doesn't speak the language, or anybody. But that's the kind of stuff. The other thing, the 2 things I would add is I think we have to look at who we hire as police officers. That there's got to be greater diversity. They've got to reflect the communities that they're serving in a better way. I think that's without question. And then that second part is the actual measuring of how police officers operate in their community. And really the most appalling statistic to me is the number of stop and frisk situations where, just in the last year and a half, when I meet a young African American in Denver, we don't have a history, an intense history of racial problems there. Ask them how many times they've been asked to put their hands on a car, how many times they've been put on the ground, and it is almost everyone, and that is really truly alarming, I think, and I think it's a national issue.
Is that something you hear as well, Governor?
No, in the forum that we had, we heard exactly the same points, that and these are respected pastors. They could be someone in education, African American, goes jogging with a hoodie, and all of a sudden they're stopped because of that. And that, does put fear. It reduces trust between the community and law enforcement, and that's something we have to address. John made a very good point about recruiting minorities in law enforcement. And until we build that trust, it's going to be difficult to recruit those minority members into law enforcement. We work very hard at that, both in the state police, but I know local law enforcement does as well. We have an African-American chief of police in Little Rock that does a great job and tries to do that, but it's all about that trust relationship and training. I think those are the 2 key points, but I do see that.
Yeah, you mentioned, Governor Hickenlooper, the incident that took place before you'd actually assumed office. You ended up in concert with the police chief, I think, suspending that officer for 10 months and later confining him to desk work, right? I think
yes.
That's a tough call for a mayor to make, especially an incoming mayor, especially when you're trying to foster decent relations between your office and the police department. And did you get blowback as a result of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was... the police, and it is a brotherhood, and I understand why that is. It's a very dangerous job, and I respect, I respect the difficulty of the job more than I can express with words. But they protested that we had 500 police officers out on the front steps of City Hall, and they all had signs of Chicken Cooper, and they were going to, I went out there and told them, I said, I've been called lots worse than that when I was in elementary school. And, I told the officers that they're not breaking any new ground. But there has to be a level of accountability, right? And I agree with what the governor said in terms of these are human beings and they're going to make mistakes, but mistakes have to have consequences.
And I would just add that not only is it a very dangerous job, but we're not paying our law enforcement officers at the level that they need to be paid. And
you might be in Arkansas. Colorado, a 6-year police officer is making $70-some thousand a year with a remarkable pension. So I'm not saying that that's too much, but I'm saying that that's a pretty good comp for you don't have a college degree, you're 26 years old. That's a pretty good income.
And are people in the law enforcement community making $70,000 6 years in Arkansas?
I doubt it. Yeah. I doubt that. But we need to enhance training. Sure. We need to compensate so that we can recruit really top quality people into law enforcement.
Right. Governor Hutchinson, not many people associate Silicon Valley or high tech as a whole with Arkansas. And yet you've done something in Arkansas that no other state has, or rather you were the very first to mandate that every high school have computer science teaching, and in fact teach computer coding as well, right? And I believe that when you began that initiative, there are only 20 teachers in the state of Arkansas who are capable of doing this, so it's been a bit of a challenge, but nonetheless, it's a remarkable thing to see. And I'm assuming that this is because you are looking ahead to, not just for its own sake, spawning a new generation of computer nerds in Arkansas, but you are thinking of this in terms of how you develop the economy, right, in Arkansas.
Oh, absolutely. It's been one of the most successful and rewarding initiatives that I've done as governor. And the motivation first was that if we train those to code computers, to write software in high school, then they're going to have incredible job opportunities, because nationally there'll be 1 million unfilled jobs in the computer science field over the next decade. And so it's a job opportunity, but then I quickly realized it's also a recruitment opportunity for technology companies in Arkansas.
Knowing that there's a talent pool then that you're developing here in Arkansas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, previously we might lose a startup technology company from Arkansas to Boston or to Austin. I don't know if we'd lose any to Colorado. No. But now they don't see the need, because we have the talent pool in Arkansas that we're building and emphasizing that. And so the key was not only mandating it in every high school, and by the way, we had a 260% increase in students. We had the largest increase in computer coding students among African American and female students. And we're exceeding our expectations, but we put $5 million into it to help retrain those teachers. So those 20 teachers started. We have got over 1,000 or more teachers now that have a background ready to teach that in Arkansas.
That's great. Governor Hickenlooper, that's a more traditional form of the economy, oil and gas. It's a $29 billion industry in Colorado. You are a geologist by training. You have described fracking in your book, The Opposite of Woe, as something that gets a terrible rap, mainly because the industry is terrible at public relations. Now, some would say, well, no, mainly because it is an environmentally fraught issue. Is that just a matter of public relations? You said that you don't think you'll ever be able to allay the concerns of some people, but are those concerns warranted?
First, I just want to commend all the work you've done on the technology training and stuff. And I think if you look at why Donald Trump has been so appealing, and so Bernie Sanders to a certain extent been so appealing, it's because so many people have lost their professions, and we haven't done a good job of training them. So these new ways of getting more people able to train people in technology is crucial. And I'm always struck by we're trying to talk about skills in Colorado, and that notion of, if you look at a bank teller, and we probably have 1/5 the bank tellers we had 10 or 15 years ago, and their skills that they have are they're numerate. They have to have a high sense of precision, sense of urgency. They've got to work collaboratively. When you look at people writing code, or someone in cybersecurity, where there are thousands and thousands, millions of jobs that are going to go unfilled, what are those basic skills? They have to be numerate, high sense of precision. They've got to have a sense of urgency. They've got to be collaborative. A bank teller would still need 6 or 8 months of code training, just like from one of your teachers. But that would allow them to go into a career that would actually probably pay them $10,000 more starting, and they would be ready. They've got those skills. So I just wanted to tag that on. We're trying to work on that. We've got a LinkedIn, a platform with LinkedIn that's going to measure skills that you accumulate and how do you take whole professions and at scale retrain those folks. In terms of fracking, it is, and I don't, if someone's concerned about the safety of their family or their community, I would never say that that is unfounded or in any way, not right. I do think that the oil and gas industry spends so much time being secretive and had such an aversion to the media. And again, paranoia is never the right word. So I'll go back to an aversion to the media that in some ways was very well founded. In other words, they would get attacked in the media and oftentimes unfairly. I mean, it's an industrial process. My defense of fracking is a couple places. One is if we're really going to get rid of coal in this country, which is now, because most of it's labor intensive to get it, it is expensive and it is highly polluting. And certainly, forget about climate change, just in terms of particulates and ozone is a very challenging fuel to create your electricity with. And we've got natural gas that is very inexpensive and will be a transition fuel. I mean, I think everyone is waiting to get to a totally clean energy economy that is as inexpensive and as reliable as the one we have. And I think that's within sight. I think we're going to see that. But my defense of fracking and the oil and gas industry is that in Colorado, at least, we have a split estate. The person who owns the surface, builds a house, or they own a farm or whatever. They don't own the minerals usually. Sometimes they do, but generally not. And our Constitution, if you own the mineral rights underneath someone's surface home, you are allowed, and you can't get within, whatever it is, 500 feet. It used to be 350, but in some cases not within 2,000 feet. But with directional drilling, people go down under there. That is what people are so upset about, is this activity is close to where people live. If you ban fracking, basically you're taking away whoever owned that mineral right. You're taking away their private property. We're not in Russia. We're not in China. We don't take people, and I am the first person, I've said the state would help pay for this. If you want to ban fracking around a community, let's use eminent domain. That's what we use, and that's when government wants to take someone's property.
Right, but granting that, but what I'm asking is whether or not the environmental concerns, leaving aside property rights, whether or not environmental concerns are warranted. I mean,
sure. So in all I can tell you, literally 98% of the oil and gas wells drilled in Colorado are fracked. Mm-hmm. We can find in the last 20 years, so this is, I don't know how many, 40,000 wells. I mean, a huge number of wells. Only one and maybe two places where the groundwater was contaminated by the fracking. That's what most people worry about. Now, we did have a lot of spills. It was either crude oil or fracking would spill into somebody's pond, and we raised. It used to be we would charge $500 a day as a fine for an ongoing spill. Well, we raised it. Now it's $15,000 a day. And the oil and gas industry, the responsible operators realize that they have to fix this, and they have a relationship of trust. If they're going to operate, the public has to trust them. So once we went to $15,000 a day, what a surprise! Those spills suddenly dramatically diminished, and we started measuring methane. Mm-hmm. Used to have a lot of methane escape. Now the oil and gas industry is spending $60 million a year extra, and they're going several times a year to any well that could conceivably be leaking any kind of methane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have fracking in Arkansas,
yes,
because we have the Fayetteville Shale, which is a great natural gas exploration region. And to me, this is just like any other area that we need to follow the science. And so when we started our fracking, there was some concern that we didn't have it exactly right. We adjusted some of our regulations to follow the science because we had some tremors that we didn't expect.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And once that adjustment was made, that fear and concern diminished. And so to me, it's a matter of fracking is appropriate to get a good source of energy out of the ground, but we just need to make sure we have the right environmental protections in there, that we don't jeopardize homeowners unnecessarily or to make the ground unstable.
Meanwhile, on the subject of commerce, unless you have been cryogenically frozen for the last year or two, you'd know that Colorado has conducted an interesting social experiment under the Hickenlooper administration regarding marijuana. I think, let's see, that there's a 15% excise tax on marijuana and 10% sales tax.
On recreational marijuana.
Recreational marijuana. Speaking purely in economic terms, has this become a boom industry for the state, leaving aside social effects?
No, and it is one of the great social experiments, and I'm not going to be popular in this room, but I opposed it because I didn't want to be in conflict with the federal government starting a regulatory framework from scratch. I mean, even Amsterdam never legalized it and gave permits and regulated it. So this last year we raised about $120 million between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. Our state budget, so that's $120 million. Our state budget is $27 billion when you include all the pass-throughs and federal subsidies for Medicaid and all that stuff. $120 million is really a drop in the bucket. And yet, we're able to use that money for making sure the kids understand, this high THC stuff, and I'm going to guess some people under 21 out here, all the brain scientists, and I remember when I was a kid, and if you read my book, you will see that I did inhale. But all the high THC now, every brain scientist I've talked to is convinced that once we get longitudinal studies, that long-term use, even in small amounts on an irregular basis. So when your brain is still rapidly growing, when you're a teenager, they think under 24, under 25, you'll lose a little sliver of your long-term memory. Now, you won't notice it at the time. It's a very small sliver, but over repeated usage over a period of time, kids are taking some significant risk they're going to lose some of their memory. With our $120 million, we're spending $8 million, $10 million a year to make sure that fact is understood by every kid in Colorado. And in the old days, before recreational marijuana was legalized, any kid who wanted it could get it, right? It wasn't expensive. Sure. And I asked one kid, a 17-year-old kid, I said, well, do you think your friends thought it is safer because we legalized it? He goes, I don't think so, really. Everybody who wanted to tried it before. He said, but the one thing you are doing is you're diminishing the number of drug dealers. He says, and a bunch of kids are talking about that, and if you think about it, most marijuana done illegally probably is rough justice about a third to maybe even up to 50 or 60% of the total drug trade. And like any business pipeline, if you take the amount of what you're selling and suddenly diminish it by 50%, you're going to have less salesmen. And this young kid said to me, he says, his name is Bucksbaum, he said, one thing, drug dealers don't care who they sell it to. At least you guys are really pushing hard to make sure kids don't get it.
Well, so now I have to ask the individual to your right, who was the former head of the DEA, what you make of all of this. I mean, are you, for one, persuaded by what Governor Hickenlooper just said regarding drug dealers and how they've presumably diminished in Colorado as a result of that? And in any event, has this turned your head at all, the experiment taking place in Colorado?
Well, we're following it very closely, first of all, and I appreciate your comments about the risk in terms of cognitive impairment to our young people. That is the greatest concern as to whether you legalize for recreational use, whether that increases drug use among the young people. And I think the answer is yes. And
not much. I mean, there's no spike, that's for sure.
And that to me is a concern. Whenever you look at the question as to what it does to the cartels, what it does to those that are operating in the illegal environment, from what I'm hearing from law enforcement, from Colorado, from the high-intensity drug trafficking area report that was issued there, that there are law enforcement concerns that you still have a black market, you still have those that are trying to undercut what is authorized, but I think you made the greatest point is that this is still a violation of federal law, and we've, for as long as we've had drug laws in this country, we've been uniform between the state and the federal level. And so now we're authorizing the state level conduct that is still illegal federally, and that your point is just well taken there, Governor. And the only way that it's even happened is because President Obama's administration said we're going to turn a blind eye to the illegal conduct that's happening in a state that might provide for recreational use. I don't think that's a good direction for our country. It'll be interesting to see what the next administration does on that. But in terms of Arkansas, we have a debate right now on medical marijuana on the ballot. And you think about it, we all want a cure for cancer. Say I have developed what I think is a cure for cancer. Would you want me to get the signatures to put it on the ballot so that people can vote on whether mine's a good cure for cancer? We don't do this in our society. Right. We follow medicine and in the scientific community and the medical community, and this is the only medical solution we're saying ought to be voted on by the people. And to me, it's just contrary to what makes good sense. So we all want to alleviate pain. But let's let the scientific community, and if we need to loosen up the research, I'm for it. We want to have good science. Let's go through the FDA approval process. Let's do it the right way and look at this. I think Texas actually did, some oil that would allow a treatment in specialized instances. That's a preferable direction than simply put it on the ballot for anybody to vote and let the public decide what's good medicine and not.
No, but in the meantime, there's another wave taking place really on both sides of the aisle in the country relating to marijuana, and that has to do with, if not decriminalization, then at least reducing the penalties. And I'm wondering, now in the state of Texas, there were a number of bills that came before the legislature. They were all defeated, but there is some momentum even in this state with that. Is that the case in Arkansas, or has your own your own views evolved in terms of strict sentences for people in possession of small amounts of marijuana?
I wouldn't say my position has changed, but I certainly agree that that's absolutely a fair debate, and that I don't think in society we want to put anybody in jail for using a small amount of marijuana. And the fact is that doesn't happen. Now, I think the bigger debate—
In Texas, you can get 6 months for having 2 ounces or less.
You can get 6 months, but who gets 6 months? And so, but that's fair. I mean, if you want to say that it is not subject to 6 months, it's only 1 month, or there's not going to be an incarceration, that is fine. I think the key difference is whether you're going to say it's legal or illegal. That's the defining difference, as you said, in Amsterdam. You can have we don't want to incarcerate them. I think that's the general content. But I look at the files of most people who are going to prison in Arkansas, and you're looking at, to get there, you have to be a multiple dealer, not a user, but a dealer, because we've got a growth in our prison population. I don't want to put somebody in there that is a user. I only want to put people in there who's a danger to society, and I would think a dealer would be in that category if they do it multiple times, primarily the methamphetamine. I don't see marijuana users going to jail.
All right. Yeah. It's,
I think, and you know much more about this than I do, but certainly one of the things I've been told, that especially with Latinos and African Americans, that the possession of marijuana would be tagged on to, let's say they hot-wired a car and stole a car, and maybe it's the second or third time they've done that, and it will be used to increase their sentence.
You know, I can't speak to every instance there, but the principal offense that they go to jail for would be the theft of an automobile. And I would suspect that it would be probably a probationary offense, perhaps the first time, if it's a nonviolent, it's not a robbery, it's not a home invasion. And that's what usually happens. The police is going to charge them with multiple offenses, and in a plea bargain process, they most likely are going to drop the possession because that's just a non-event compared to the theft. Now, what I also we're looking at in Arkansas is a very important part of this debate is we have to deal with the addiction problems. And that's leading to increased problems with foster children.
Well, but that's not marijuana. We're coming pretty clear on statistics that I think we'll be able to demonstrate that marijuana is no more a gateway drug than alcohol.
I would agree with the point that that's not the primary challenge with foster children. It's more of methamphetamine and some of the other drugs. I would agree with that. But you know, whenever you're looking at someone that has an addiction problem, and usually there are multiple drugs involved. Sure. It's, you know, marijuana, I do believe it's a gateway drug. You start with marijuana, there's other things. You might stop there, but anybody who's on cocaine or anybody on methamphetamine usually started with marijuana. You wind up on the others, and that's where those multiple drug users wind up with challenges with other criminal offenses, property offenses, supporting their habit, addiction challenges, and neglecting children.
Well, but then you get into pain relief, which to get marijuana legally okayed through the channels for pain relief will probably take another, 7 years, 6 years, something like that. And opioids, which we legalized, perhaps erroneously back, that's where a lot of those addictions are coming from, way more than marijuana. And I think that's the challenge there is that we're having the number of kids that are, you know, through prescription medicine they get into in the, in the medicine cabinet, and then at a certain point in time they transition that into heroin, and then the heroin leads to who knows what.
Totally separate issue. I agree with the opioid concern.
Well, but it's connected in the sense of pain relief of marijuana, medical marijuana being a legitimate relief of pain in people's minds and not leading to the other drug abuses.
Marijuana is a Schedule I drug,
I know.
which simply means that it has no legitimate medical purpose by the medical community. That's the first question there. Opioids has a legitimate medical purpose, and so it is alleviating pain. The medical community has not cried out and said, we have to have smoking marijuana to relieve pain. They have developed Marinol, which is the THC content of marijuana that is used in a prescription pill that is available for pain relief. So the medical community said, this is what we need. Now, I believe and listen to the medical community. And if they say this is necessary, smoking marijuana to alleviate certain elements of pain, I'm not going to argue with the medical community.
You would follow their guidance legislatively if you were to hear that?
Yes, and they have not cried out for that. It's not supported by the American Medical Association.
Yeah. We've got time for questions, by the way, from the audience, if anybody has any. Cannot see.
There they are.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. And we'll go back and forth.
Hello, my name is Hasib Abdullah. I'm a resident here in Austin. My question is for the governors and the polarization of politics. Just hearing you guys talk, I think Governor Hutchinson, you were the first person to go to Cuba for the opening up trade, and there were some grumblings in the Republican Party. And then Governor, about the fracking, it's kind of different from most Democrats. Do you think the fact that you're governors, you're closer to the people, so you're more moderate? And do you think the polarization is really a Washington problem, and that maybe governors and state representatives are the best people to solve it? Thank you.
Did you guys get that question? It basically is about whether polarization, having heard what we've heard from these gentlemen, whether that's something that is more a phenomenon nationally than statewide, I believe, given.
Well, I've served both at the national level and in state governors, and there is a difference. I think that governors are more pragmatic, they're problem solvers, they have to bring people together to address challenges. And whenever I look as governor at Cuba, for example, and the fact that there's 11 million people down there that want Arkansas poultry, that want Arkansas rice, but we're restricted because we can't compete with Brazil and Thailand for selling to them because we can't extend credit. Those are business to transactions, and we're limiting by the federal government the ability to extend credit. That hasn't worked for 50 years. We need to change that policy, extend credit, open up those markets. That's a pragmatic approach, but it's also, I think, a principled approach as governor that what we're doing hasn't worked there. Governors are problem solvers, and in Arkansas, I just take joy of the fact that we can work with Democrats, Republicans alike to do a computer coding initiative, to increase trade for our state, grow jobs. So I like the leadership that governors provide, and that's not to take away from Congress, but it's a difference. And I do think governors, despite the results of the last primary contest, are really good chief executives for our nation.
We obviously agree on that. The buck does stop if you're a governor. You've got to answer problems. I do think that the pond is somewhat poisoned. That the level of attack ads, we see at every level, especially in national, but also in gubernatorial. You never see it in the private sector. You never see Coca-Cola doing attack ads against Pepsi. Trust me, those companies don't like each other, and yet if Coke. Attack ads work. If Coke did an attack ad against Pepsi, Pepsi's sales would go down. Pepsi would have no choice but to do an attack ad against Coke. Coke would attack Pepsi, Pepsi would attack Coke. They would depress sales in the entire product category of soft drinks. What we're doing is we're depressing the product category of democracy, and people are just tuning out.
No.
And I think
the product category of voter turnout, too, you believe?
Voter turnout, this is the best form of government there is, but it's fragile, and people are not going into detail. Democracy depends on two things. People have to be empathetic, wanting to help people they're never going to meet, and they've also got to be willing to dig into the facts about an issue.
It's interesting that the private sector, the business community, makes that pragmatic judgment that this is bad for everybody.
Right.
But in the political arena,
it's all short term.
We don't make that same judgment that this is bad for the body politic. let's be pragmatic about that.
Yeah, as long as it works for you, as long as you win, then yeah, go ahead.
The fastest growing party right now is the independents. And part of this is also that as it gets more vitriolic, reasonable people will no longer get into politics. And so you end up having the extremes of both parties in the primaries and running. The big fear for a Republican now is a Tea Party person will come out and do a primary on them. With Democrats, it'll be a Bernie or someone will come in. And the middle of the road the middle of the electorate is getting less and less represented.
Yeah, go ahead.
Governor Hutchinson, you said you're a Trump supporter now. The core of his campaign is racism. It's a war against black, brown, and Muslim people. It's not a bug, that is a feature. Do you support that as well?
Well, I disagree with your analysis. For example, whenever you're looking at immigration issues, if it is appropriate, and I served in Homeland Security, it is appropriate to look more closely at someone that comes from an area that is rampant with terrorism.
Like Germany?
Like
England?
That any place
Would we
that
bar the mayor of London from coming here?
May I answer your question? It is appropriate to look at individuals more closely when they come from an area that is rampant with terrorism. And you're right, it could be someone coming from Germany that we need to have close scrutiny of if there's a history of terrorism or they've traveled to areas that have more terror. And so, yes, my daughter-in-law was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. She will probably not vote for Donald Trump. And, that's and I understand it because we haven't done a very good job. Donald Trump has not done a very good job of making sure that our language, that our rhetoric is unifying. But at the same time, I think it's inappropriate to say that there is racism involved in that. I think the issue is how he articulates that.
How could you deny that is not the center of his campaign?
I just did.
But I mean, that's not honest.
Yeah, hang on, Terry. Let me just in your bones, do you not believe that Donald Trump is a racist?
I don't see it. If you look at what he has said, tell me something that...
I'm just asking.
We can start with birtherism, right? You can start with that.
President Obama wasn't born.
The denial of all Muslim people. Are we at war with all Muslim people? The notion the notion that immigrants are coming from their countries to kill us is deeply racist and not borne out by the facts.
If you listen to his most recent enunciations, he has articulated in terms of geography, which means that he's getting some good advice from Chris Christie and people who have a good background in security. And that's where you need to articulate it. So yes, I would like to see that the rhetoric changed, but I believe that when you look at the essence of policy, we have a serious challenge in this country that we've got to do a better job in terms of vetting those that might come here that might pose a risk to this country. That is a fair policy. I have articulated some differences with him in terms of the wall. That doesn't change, but that doesn't mean you're a racist. It means that you believe that we have a mass immigration problem that we have to deal with in this country.
Sorry, let's just get in a couple more questions. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Evan Williams, and first of all, I would like to thank you all for such an insightful discussion today. And my question is for Governor Hickenlooper. Despite sort of winning the lottery and being born and raised here in the great state of Texas, I would love nothing more to, and am planning on moving to Colorado sometime in the near future. Hopefully
wait, not Arkansas?
I'm sure Arkansas is a great place. I need to visit someday, but I'm in love with Colorado. So the question I have for you is, what Texas strengths, what values can someone like me bring to the table to provide a positive impact on the state? And vice versa, what can we learn from Colorado so we can make both places a better place to live? And also, do you plan on visiting any breweries while you're here in town?
Colorado just went over the 350 mark in terms of federally licensed breweries. I started my brew pub in 1988, and we were the fourth brewery, the second craft brewery in the state of Colorado, to see that they're now 350. First, Texas does a lot of things really, really well. And I mean, one thing that they do, there's a sense of place. You know, the word topophilia means love of place. Texans love Texas. And I never really quite got that until I dug into the public school system, where in Texas, you'll have anywhere from 7 to 9 years where you will have significant parts of what you're learning will have to do with Texas history. People in Texas are taught all about the cool parts of their history at a level that most of us, we're almost every other state. I think there's only 1 or 2 other states that do more than 2 years of really teaching their own history to their citizens. I mean, that love of place, I think, is incredibly important in terms of people being happy with their lives, which means they're going to be more productive and they're going to be better neighbors and all the things that make democracy happen. Texas also has an innovative spirit, a sense of entrepreneurship, a sense that you can do anything. And part of that is that pride in place. But also part of it is the way the entire culture here celebrates business. Not that it's, I would argue sometimes they don't have the regulatory framework quite as high as it should be, but generally, I'm a pro-business person, right? I think that that's the best way to have a safer world and to diminish poverty is to have a strong economy, but with the highest standards of you know, in the environment, the highest standards in terms of good government. So anyway, we'll talk later about what you're going to do when you come to Colorado, because we've always depended on the kindness of in-migration.
Yeah, we've got time for one more question, so go ahead.
Great, thank you. My name is Berkeley Mashburn. I'm a senior here at UT Austin. My question's also for you, Governor Hickenlooper. I used to live in Colorado. I lived in Vail, Colorado for 3 years in middle school.
Wow.
And the street I lived on is now known as the Green Mile because there are so many dispensaries right there. So I was wondering if you could speak to how the legalization of marijuana has affected the tourism industry in Colorado and whether you would recommend legalization in other places for that purpose.
So they're all excellent questions. And first, people think that, you know, we legalized marijuana because we thought it was a business deal, and it wasn't. We have been either first or second for the last 10 years for the in-migration of millennials, of young people. And most young people don't think there's that big a difference between marijuana and alcohol. If anything, they think marijuana is a better way to relax than alcohol system-wide. So they're the ones that's why we legalized marijuana. It wasn't to attract business or to help our budget. In terms of tourism, we do see that there's a lot of marijuana sold in the tourist communities, but the polling we've done seems to indicate that those are people that smoke pot at home, and they think this is kind of a groovy thing to, you know, go smoke pot legally, or you know, they use a lot of edibles. We haven't seen a spike in Colorado of Colorado citizens. In other words, the people that were smoking it when it was illegal still are. The people that were not smoking it still aren't, which is, I mean, that's a big worry that we had. But I still tell the governor, I tell everyone, let's wait 2 or 3 years, because his concerns about the effect on young people, I think we need more time. And it's great to have, we're putting $15 or $20 million to drug counseling, to addiction, to having safe homes for people that are really going through, who really did, young people especially that went off the rails. We have more resources now than we ever had for treating those problems, which we've always had. But we're still very worried that there might be a dramatic increase in that, in which case no level of taxation would justify those lives lost. So it does help tourism, but if you look at the increases of tourism, we've had 6 consecutive years of record tourism. So that's before it was legalized. And the curve, the rate of growth hasn't changed. So we don't think it's fanning the flames.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but this is the very last event of the afternoon. As I mentioned, there is a reception following, including a book signing by Governor Hickenlooper. I would like very much to thank Governor Hickenlooper and Governor Hutchinson for a really, really great conversation. Thanks, guys.